Today we are talking about the birth of Islam. So earlier in our ancient history unit, we talked about the birth of Christianity, the world's largest religion. Today we're talking about the birth of Islam, the world's second largest religion. All right. So first off, the religious situation in the Middle East before the birth of Islam, meaning in the early Middle Ages, like the 500s or so, was a big conglomeration. There was a big mixture of religions throughout the Middle East before Islam made its appearance. You have a lot of Christianity there, a lot of Judaism, and you also have tribal religions, Zoroastrianism, and other polytheistic religions that are kind of similar to the ancient Mesopotamian religion. So, starting off here, we have Muhammad. Muhammad was the founder of Islam. He lived from 570 to 632. And in the year 610, when he was 40 years old, it is believed that the angel Gabriel appeared to Muhammad and told him to memorize and preach a new revelation from God that would be used to, quote, restore God's people to once again worshiping the one true God called Allah. All right. And Muhammad is seen by Muslims as Allah's final prophet. So that means they view other prophets that Jews and Christians recognize, like Abraham, Moses, and even Jesus, to be former lesser prophets of Allah. And they see Muhammad to be the final and greatest prophet of their God, Allah. Okay, so Islam is a monotheistic religion, meaning they only believe in one God. So in that way, it's similar to Judaism and Christianity. So Muhammad spread this new message of his verbally. His message was not written down during his lifetime. It was written down after his death by a guy named Abu Bakr in what became known as the Quran. It can also be spelled with a Q, but here I spell it with a K, so be sure you can recognize both spellings of it. The Quran, meaning the holy book of Islam. Now, this new religion was, as you could probably guess, accepted by some and rejected by others in the region. Okay, here's the region where Muhammad was from. Okay, he's from this town of Mecca, then he went to Medina. So this entire area in what is now modern-day Saudi Arabia is where the religion began. So the holiest city of Islam became Mecca, which is the place where Muhammad was born. The second holiest city being Medina, the place where Muhammad and his followers went to, and where they gained a lot of new followers there. And the third holiest city of Islam is Jerusalem, the place where Muslims believe Muhammad ascended into heaven. So Islam is comprised of 5 things that every Muslim must do in order to go to heaven. And these are called the 5 pillars, the 5 pillars of Islam. And I bring this up just so we better understand the religion, so we can better understand the history of it. All right. And the 5 pillars that still Muslims to this day follow. Number 1 is prayer. They have to pray 5 times a day facing the city of Mecca. So they kneel and they bow and they face the city of Mecca 5 times a day. The second pillar is pilgrimage. A pilgrimage is like a religious journey. And every good Muslim is expected to make a trip to Mecca at least once in their lifetimes, to the place where Muhammad was born. There you see on the bottom picture there, the Kaaba. That's seen as the holiest site in Islam. The third pillar is alms, which basically means giving money to the poor, giving alms or charity to the poor. They're expected to do that. Fasting, especially fasting during the season of Ramadan. Fasting means you don't eat, and this is a holy season of Islam. And the final pillar is faith, believing in the phrase, there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet, basically having faith in Allah or faith in the Quran. All right, so these are the 5 pillars of Islam. Really easy to remember. It's P-P-A-F-F, PAF, all right? That's how I was taught in world history, and I still remember it to this day, so that's a way y'all can remember it too. So Islam spread during Muhammad's lifetime. The community of Islam became a nation with Muhammad as its leader. Okay, so Muhammad was not only a religious leader, he was also a military general. And so the religion spread often by force. Okay, so he would invade a city and spread the news of Islam. And if people accepted it, they would be grafted into the community of Islam. And if people refused to accept Islam, then a lot of times they would be slaughtered by Muhammad or his followers. So some people called Islam the religion of the sword because, at least in the beginning of the religion, it was spread by violent force. So after Muhammad's death, the community of Islam really split into two because you had two different people who people thought should be the successor to Muhammad, should be the next leader of Islam. First, you have Abu Bakr, and this guy was Muhammad's father in law. And he was appointed as the caliph, which means the leader. Okay? A caliphate is a territory of land with a religious and political leader. So even though Abu Bakr was chosen as Muhammad's successor, many Muslims believed that Muhammad's son in law, Ali, actually was the rightful heir and should have been appointed caliph after Muhammad's death instead of Abu Bakr. So this caused a split in the religion, a big schism, and Abu Bakr's supporters became known as Sunni Muslims, and Ali's supporters became known as Shia Muslims. And this division still exists to this day. If you look here, this is a map of the Islamic world, at least a lot of the Islamic world, minus North Africa and some other smaller countries. But here's the Middle East right here. Everywhere in the light green, that area is predominantly Sunni Muslim, and then the areas in the dark green, mostly places like Iran, are mostly Shia Muslim. Okay, so they have slightly different theology, but mostly it's their different tradition regarding who they believed should have been the successor to Muhammad after his death. Now, Abu Bakr contributed to the spread of Islam by recording the Quran for future generations. He recorded the words of Muhammad. What Muhammad said was revealed to him by the angel Gabriel. And to this day, devout Muslims will only read the Quran in its original Arabic. They say that's the only way to read the word of Allah truthfully, and therefore it's not really accepted in other translations. Of course, you can find English translations. Those are easy to find, but devout Muslims will only read it in its original Arabic. Now, Abu Bakr also started a military campaign to spread the Islamic world beyond the Arabian Peninsula. So if you look at this map, the area in the dark brown, that was the extent of the spread of Islam during Muhammad's life. And then after his death, all this other area is territory that the community of Islam conquered. Now, by the end of the 700s, Islam had spread to what we know today as the Islamic world, that being the Middle East and North Africa, really that entire area in the map. And it had also spread to Spain. Okay, Spain today is no longer an Islamic area, but for hundreds of years it was controlled by Islam. Now, one famous Muslim from the Middle Ages was a guy named Mansa Musa. We'll read about him a little bit later, but he ruled the kingdom of Mali in Africa during the 1300s, and he is known as perhaps the richest person in the history of the world, perhaps the richest person ever to live. During his life, he traveled to Egypt and also traveled to Mecca because he was a devout Muslim, and all devout Muslims have to go to Mecca once in their lifetime. Then he traveled to Constantinople, to Russia, to India, really just all over the world. And this expedition really connected sub-Saharan Africa, meaning Africa south of the Sahara, and sub-Saharan Africa for the first time really became very influential on the world stage because Mansa Musa really connected it to the rest of the world, displayed his wealth, and showed people what Africa was capable of. Okay, so a big question with the spread of Islam throughout the Middle East and North Africa is how did Christians respond? Because the Holy Land, okay, modern day Israel or Palestine, that is the Holy Land for Christians, for Jews, and also part of the Holy Land for Muslims. So how did Christians respond to their Holy Land, places like Jerusalem, being completely taken over by the Muslim world? Well, first of all, they certainly did not like the fact that former Christian land had turned Muslim. However, there was no big attempt by Christians to take it back from the Muslims by force. And the reason why there was no attempt from Christians to take it back from the Muslims by force is because the Muslims that controlled that region of Jerusalem and the Holy Land still allowed Christians to make pilgrimages to the Holy Land. Okay, so Christians said, you know what, I don't like that our Holy Land is controlled by Muslims, but at the same time, They still allow me to come visit the holy site, the place where Jesus died and was raised again. So I'm not going to fight it. I'm just going to try to be peaceful here. And that was really the state of the world between Christians and Muslims for about 300 years. But that all changed about 300 years later when Muslims stopped allowing Christians to make pilgrimages to the Holy Land. And then something called the Crusades occurred because of that. We'll be talking about the Crusades a little bit later, okay? But that is the birth of Islam.